Start. Okay. Hello, everybody. We're here in Nadi, where we're not allowed to have programs, and we're at someone's house, which is two people, and we're gonna have classes, and because it's Ram Nomi time. So first, we're gonna chant Song to Hanuman. And many of the devotees will be watching here in Fiji because Fiji's on a lockdown. That means no chanting, no, not no chanting, but actually no groups. No groups. Krishna sent me here. I'm in exile. Been forced to enjoy Nandi. Hanuman, oh Hanuman, Hanuman, oh Hanuman. Soft. Ragapati Raghava Raja Ram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Hanuman, 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 oh Hanuman. Ragapati Raghava Raja Ram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram, Patita Pavana Sita Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Hanuman, 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 Hanuman. Hanuman, 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 Hanuman. Okay, thank you. So now we'll speak some katha about the Ramayana. So what katha do you prefer to hear? Do you want to hear about Rama's appearance? Do you want to hear about Hanuman's appearance? Or do you want to hear about the story about Vishwamitra? Or do you want to hear any of the stories you want? Which, you want to do the Vishwamitra? That's one of my favorite ones. Okay, here we go. So, phew, let's just move that. I have a lot of details on this story. Okay, once upon a time, there was a great king. His name was Kaushika, who later on became Vishwamitra. But originally his name was Kaushika. And he was visiting the ashram of Vashishta Muni. Vashishta Muni, of course, is the guru of the whole Ikshvaku dynasty, beginning with Ikshvaku, Manu, etc., all the way down to Dasrath, Ram, etc., and also many others in the meantime too. Also, he was the guru of. Actually, so many side stories I can tell about. Also, he was the guru of Mithila. Did you know that? Mithila originally, he was the guru of the first king in Mithila, not later on. Later on, Janaka had a different guru, but that's a different story. So let's tell the story of how he got kicked out of being the guru in Mithila. You know, Mithila, where Janaka came from, and Situ came. So once upon a time, so I'm going to try to tell stories within stories, so it's going to be a little hard to follow. So once upon a time, there was a great king, Nimi, whose guru was Vashishta Muni. And King Nimi was a pure devotee. He wanted to actually do a sacrifice and chant the holy name during the sacrifice. And he went to his guru, Vashishta Muni, and he said to Vashishta Muni, that can you do a sacrifice for us? And Vashishta Muni said, I'm happy to do it, but at first I have to go to the heavenly planets to do a sacrifice for them. And so Nimi didn't like this because he thought, human life is very short. Durlabam, Manasa Janma, Tadapdurvamar. So better I do the sacrifice while Guru Maharaj is away. So he did the sacrifice while Guru Maharaj was away, and Guru Maharaj came back, and Guru Maharaj got so angry he cursed Nimi to die. Nice Guru. And then Nimi got so angry with his Guru Maharaj, he gave him some nice Guru Dakshin. He cursed the Guru to die. So both the Nimi and Guru died. Vashishta Muni and Nimi died. Vashishta Muni later on appeared again. He's like an eternal personality in the Vedas. He appeared again through the ascendant of Mitra and Varuna, which is a different story. But what happened with Nimi was that the sages and Brahmins preserved his body in a vat of oil. And so they could continue the sacrifice, because usually you don't want to do the funeral right in the middle of a sacrifice. So they finished the sacrifice, and when they finished the sacrifice, the demigods came down and said, "What do you want? We'll give you anything you want." And they said, "We want King Nimi brought back to life." And so the demigods said, "Okay." And King Nimi sat out of the oil, but King Nimi said, "I don't want to be back to life. I want to go back to Godhead. Don't take me in this material world anymore." So he went back in the oil, and the people didn't know what to do. There was no king. In those days, they had to breed a king. In other words, it has to be good genes, genetic engineering, like they have nowadays. So what they did is they took the genes from King Nimi's body. They used a process that's described as churning, and they churned it, and they got Janaka the first out of there. Now the father of Sita Devi was like Janaka the 10th or something like that. So there's like in England they have different kings like Edward the First, Edward the Second, Edward the Third, or even the popes, Pope Pius the First, Pope this, the second. So anyway, and then Vashishta Muni was no longer the guru. And so they had a different guru. Anyway, and their guru was Satanya, not Satanya, maybe Satanya. But that guru, the guru they eventually got, was the son of Ahalya and Gautama Rishi. You understand? And it was Ahalya when she was saved by Ram, brought back. The guru of King Nimi, Janaka, was actually very pleased to hear that. Okay, so let's get back to the story of Viswamitra. So Viswamitra, he visited the ashram of Vashishta Muni, and Vashishta Muni received him very nicely. Vashishta Muni said to him that you can invite your whole army for prasad. And so Viswamitra Muni, or Kaushika at that time, Kaushika said, "Is that possible? I have thousands and tens of thousands of soldiers and horses and everything like that. We're going to destroy your ashram." But Vashishta said, "No problem. I have this desire cow, Nandini, and she can produce unlimited anything you want." So the soldiers all sat down for prasad, and anything any of them wanted, they got. Some of them wanted Duruka, and others, not really. I just made that one up. That's not in the Ramayana. But some of them wanted whatever they wanted. And at the end of the meal, Nandini produced dancing girls to entertain them. Mm-hmm. And so, therefore, Kaushika, who was later on Viswamitra, he said, "I want Nandini." And so he said, "I'll offer you 10 million cows in exchange." And Vashishta said, no way. So he kept offering. And then Kaushika said, "I'm going to take her anyway." He took her, and she managed to escape and run back. And she said to Vashishta, "Didn't you want me to stay?" And he said, "But I'm not going to fight. I'm a Brahmin. But if you want to stay, stay." And he gave her that order because she's a desire cow. All these soldiers poured out of her. And they killed all the soldiers of Kaushika and all the sons of Kaushika too. So this poor guy, he was thinking, "Oh, I got to get even." So then he starts performing austerities, pleases Lord Shiva, and then he gets all these weapons. big, big weapons, especially the Brahmastra weapon, which is actually the most powerful weapon. Then he goes back to Vashishta Muni's ashram, and he fires them all. And Vashishta Muni's people they start to run away at that point, but Vashishta Muni just pulls out his Brahminical staff, and he absorbs all the weapons, including the Brahmastra. So then, Nisamrita, who is Kaushika, he decides, I want to be a Brahmin. This is too much for me. The only way I can defeat Vashishta Muni is by becoming a Brahmana. So then he begins to execute all these really heavy austerities, chanting whatever he's chanting, and eventually he gets blessed with being a Rajarshi, which means a saintly king. Let me adjust this. Okay. He gets blessed with being a saintly king. And he says, that's not enough. I want to become a Brahma Rishi, a Brahmarshi. And so he goes back and starts to perform even more austerities. Then what happens, as he's performing austerities, there's this other king who is actually from the Ikshvaku dynasty. His name is Trishanku. And this Trishanku, he's really lusty. I mean, he wants material things, but he doesn't want to do the austerities. So he wants to go to heaven in the same body. And that's pretty bad. Because in heaven, I'll tell you something that happens in heaven. Nobody smells bad in heaven. You know, they don't, you know, they're always beautiful. There's no ugliness, no bad stuff. And even when they have children, they're born full grown. So no crying or diapers or anything like that. It's pretty nice, isn't it? You know, taking care of children is really good. I often think that if I had to be woken up 10 times in the night, I would check into an institution. So in the heavenly planets, it's really nice. So you can't really go to heaven in the same body. So he goes to his guru. At that time, Vashishta is the guru of the Ishvaku dynasty. Remember that. So he goes to Vashishta and says, I want to go to heaven in this body. And Vashishta says, you're in Maya, buddy. Just calm down, do some sacrifices, and the next body you take. Because you got to change your body to go to heaven. Like Prabhupada said, even to go to other planets and enter into the other planets, you got to change your body. You can't just go in a spaceship or a spacesuit. If you actually want to be there, you have to have a specific type. Like Prabhupada gave the example of there's entities on the sun. And he said if you want to mix with those entities, you have to have a fiery body. It's true. Or if you want to mix with the fish, you've got to have a fish body. Or you want to mix with the chickens, then eat chicken. Murgi body. Right? So therefore, Trishanku wasn't satisfied. So he went to the 100 sons of Vashishta. And he said to Vashishta's sons, your father didn't do it for us, but, you know, I think you can do it for me. And Vashishta's sons got so angry with him, they cursed him to become a Chandala. So all, Chandala, so that means really low class. Chandala. So all of his ornaments, they turned black. And he was like, he looked like extremely ugly. His clothes turned black. Everything happened. And so then he thought, I got to still go to heaven. So then he goes to Vishwamitra Muni, who by that time is performing austerities. And he tells Vishwamitra Muni, I want to go to heaven, and Vashishta didn't do it for me. So remember, there's a competition between Vashishta and Vishwamitra Muni. So Vishwamitra says, yes, I'll let you go to heaven. So he calls for all the Brahmins in the area to help him with this particular sacrifice he's going to do. And even asked the sons of Vashishta. Vishwamitra asked for the sons of Vashishta to come, and they refused to come. And then he curses them to take 700 births as Chandalas. So remember, every time he loses his temper, this is an important part of the story. This is really why the story is told. Because every time he gets angry and loses his temper, he loses the results of all of his austerities. And so, you know, so anyway, so he curses all these boys, does the sacrifices, and nothing happens. Trishanku doesn't go to heaven. So he's wondering, what's happened here? Okay, I'll send Trishanku to heaven with my own power. So he says, you should go to heaven. And Trishanku starts to go up to heaven, and demigods see him coming, this really ugly creep going to heaven. And the demigods say, no, go back down. And then Visamitra says, go back up. And the demigods say, go back down. So he's going up and down like a yo-yo. You know what a yo-yo is? And finally, the demigods and Vishwamitra make a deal. All right, he can have his own heaven. Vishwamitra produces an artificial secondary heaven so that Trishanku can enjoy there. And that's, anyway, so therefore, Vishwamitra loses all of his power at this particular point. Then he goes to Pushkara, which is where Lord Brahma's place, and he begins to do austerities again. Now something else happens. While he's in Pushkara, there's this boy, Shudikshepa, who comes. And Shudikshepa is going to be offered in a human sacrifice. And at that time they did human sacrifices. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But it was bona fide. We don't do that. So anyway, so Shudikshepa is going to be offered in the sacrifice. So he goes to Viswamitra and says, save me, save me, save me. And Viswamitra says to his sons, one of you should take this Shudikshepa's place. So they say, no, Dad, this is ridiculous. We're not going to do this. So then he curses all of his sons to become dog eaters. He has a problem here, He's like some people I know who lose their temper like really quickly. So don't be like that. So, because you actually lose your austerities by losing your temper. Especially if losing your temper causes you to commit offenses against Vaishnavas. That's the worst thing. You should never criticize, never physically hurt a Vaishnava, never even think anything bad. It's described, even if you think bad about a Vaishnava comes to your house and you look at him with staring eyes, the vultures of hell will pluck your eyeballs out. So, I'm coming over to take prashad. Anyways, that's funny. So anyway, so what happens, this is a really interesting story for me. I love this story. So therefore, sons refuse. So he actually gives Shudikshepa a mantra where Lord Vishnu comes and saves him from the sacrifice. So at this particular point, he loses all of his austerity again, because he's cursed his sons and used up all of his tejas. So he doesn't, and then he continues in Pushkar, and after 100 years, he's given the title of Rishi by Lord Brahma. Okay. Rishi just means sage, not Brahma Rishi or Brahma Rishi. And he's really not happy. So he does another 100 years of sacrifice. In the meantime, while he's doing that sacrifice, the demigods get worried. And what they usually do when they get worried, they do several things. I mean, sometimes they steal horses from the sacrifice, from the Ashvamedha sacrifices. But in this particular instance, they wanted to send down a girl to stop Vishwamitra from doing the sacrifices. They get really worried. Even when Lord Vishnu, in the form of Narayan Rishi, was doing austerities, they sent down apsaras to deter Lord Vishnu. And then Lord Vishnu, that is Narayan Rishis, they just yawned when they saw all the apsaras. And they produced an apsara. Does anyone know who they produced? Who was the apsara that Lord Vishnu produced? Urvasi. That's how Urvasi came about. She comes from Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu said to the demigods, you can take her back with you. So anyway, so the demigods sent down, this particular point, they sent down Menaka. And it's described in the Valmiki Ramayana that Menaka just rang her ankle bells. And Vishwamitra just opened his eyes. Huh? and it was love at first sight. And they did what's called a Gandharva marriage, exchanging garlands. You save money. All these marriages you do nowadays are too expensive. I know so many people who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their marriage, and they had on their daughter's marriage, and then they had to work. I had one friend who had to work, who has to work. He was like 70 years old. His daughter was young somehow or other, and he has to work until he's like 90 to pay off the mortgage. It's not worth it. Just tell the girl to pay for her own marriage. Yeah, it's so expensive, isn't it? And it's not. You know why they do it? Just for prestige. So because if you want blessings, you just go to the temple. Just go before Radha and Krishna. It's not for blessings. I'll give blessings for free, I won't charge anything. It's just so the relatives won't criticize them. And then here in Fiji, they have to fly the relatives in from all over the world, right? It's so expensive. Better to use Gandharva style. Or even better than that is the Rakshasa style. That's my recommended method, yeah. You don't like that method? No, why not? You have daughters. No, Rakshasa is not a bad style. Krishna did it. Yeah. It's not bad. Arjuna did it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's bona fide for Kshatriyas to do it. That doesn't mean it's for Rakshasas. It's the style is Rakshasa style. Of course, Ravan, I was just reading the Ramayana today. I was reading the Valmiki Ramayana today about Ravana's wives. It was amazing. Hanuman, when he first went to Lanka, after he went around, saw everything, he entered into Ravana's palace, and it's described that there are literally hundreds or thousands of girls just lying there drunk. And he's just, liquor on their breaths. And Hanuman he was flying around, little tiny Hanuman at that point. He was flying around, and he was thinking, what am I doing here? I'm a brahmachari. And then he remembered, I am actually doing this for Lord Ram. Finally, he sees Ravan and Mandodari on this bigger bed, and he gets ready to punch and kill Ravan. And he says, well, Ram didn't tell me to do that. And first he actually thinks that Mandodari is Sita, and he starts kissing his tail, thinking it's an amazing story. So anyway, Ravan kidnapped all those girls, and he married them. That was the marriage for Ravan. And the interesting thing is that because Ravan couldn't force himself upon a woman, he was actually cursed by Nalakuvara. Nalakuvara cursed him. Yeah, it's not actually Nalakuvara. It's Nalakuvara is the right pronunciation. Most devotees pronounce it Nalakuvara. It's Nalakuvara. But anyway, so he was cursed by Nalakuvara because he had attacked another heavenly girl, Ramba, and that his head would split. He would die immediately if he attacked any woman against her will. But it turns out that 100% of the girls he kidnapped liked it. Why? Because they got a rich husband, a handsome husband, a famous husband, practically Bhagawan. Right? Who would not marry Ravan? Like I said to any of you ladies, here's this man with unlimited money. Unlimited money, handsome, he's not going to get old like your husband. They would jump in his pushbook of Iman in 1 minute. Right? Yeah. He said, what's the use of this other husband? Isn't it? I mean, just who cares about this ugly old husband, he can, isn't it? So therefore, it's true, actually. That's why all the princesses that he kidnapped stayed with him, and it's described in the Ramayana. They were happy. because they had anything they wanted. It's all described. There were mountains of jewels when Hanuman was going through there looking for Sita Devi. There were mountains of jewels. He went through the banquet hall, banquet hall where they eat, and there was all this nice food like goats, anyway, meat and wine. There's a whole description of Valmiki Ramayana about how the banquet hall was set up, and there were like big pitchers of wine there, and meat, anything you would want. Everything was like silver and gold. Wow, what a life, isn't it? And Lanka was such a beautiful place anyway. It wasn't ugly. And so anyway, some of the people there were ugly. It's described in the Valmiki Ramayana that some of the Rakshasinis, they had heads from their stomachs. The heads were growing out of the stomachs. So, but that's not Ravana's wives. Ravana had beautiful wives. Don't worry, he would never marry a girl who had a head and a stomach. Some of the devotees have their stomach in their hearts. Anyway, it's a little bit different. Or the hearts in the stomach. So anyway, let's get back. All right, so let's get back to Vishwamitra. So he falls in love with Menaka. And says to her, marry me, and she says, of course. And for 10 years they lived together. And after 10 years, he says, you fooled me. And she's all nervous, but he says, I know, it's everything. You're innocent. Indra sent you. There's no problem. So then, at that point, she goes away, he goes away, but there's a little girl there. They had a daughter. And this daughter was taken care of by vultures. And her name was Shakuntala. You heard that name before? Shakuntala. She's met all Valmiki Ramayana. All Valmiki. Her name was Shakuntala, and so I'll tell the Shakuntala story before we get back to the Vishwamitra story, which I told before in Lotoka, but anyway, I'll tell it again. So Shakuntala was so beautiful, the vultures were taking care of her. And then this sage, Kanva Muni, comes and he finds this little girl and he adopts her as his daughter. So he takes care of her. She grows up, becomes very beautiful. She's about 16 years old. And this king, Dushmanta, he's also from the Ikshvaku dynasty. He comes and he comes to the ashram and he sees her. And guess what? He says, marry me. Kings are very lusty. These Vedic kings, they don't spend any time. I mean, like Shantanu and Ganga Devi, you remember that story from the Mahabharata? Shantanu says, sees Ganga Devi, marry me, and she says, okay, but you could never disagree with me. Okay. And so she goes around and kills 7 of her kids. And then Shantanu, the other story with Shantanu is Satyavati, right? The fisher girl. He falls in love with this girl who's rowing a boat. And then Bhishma has to give up, his kingdom and everything like that to allow his father to marry, because Bhishma was the son of Shantanu. So, anyway, so there's this little girl, Shakuntala, is her name, means the vulture girl. And so she's adopted by Kanva Muni. Dushmanta falls in love with her. And they get married, Gandharva style again. So he goes away. He leaves her with his ring, the king's ring. And he tells her that I'm going to call for you to come and join me later on. Okay. And she says, great. So at that point, he leaves, goes back to his kingdom. And she's dreaming of him 24 hours a day. Oh, my dear Dushmanta, Dushmanta, wherefore art thou, Dushmanta? I can't live without you, Dushmanta. You're the heart of my hearts, Dushmanta. I wish we could chant so nicely. Oh, Dushmanta, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are coming from my eyes like torrents of rain. I know no one but Dushmanta is my Lord. And he shall remain so. Anyway, this is love. Anyway, so getting back to the point. So what happens in the meantime, because she's so much bewildered in love, Durvasa Muni comes to their ashram, and she doesn't pay attention to Durvasa Muni, which is a big mistake, because Durvasa Muni has a bad temper. And Durvasa Muni, he actually curses her that Dushmanta will forget her. And then one of her friends goes to Durvasa Muni and says, can't do that. The girl's in love. You got to be aloof and passionate to the poor girl. And Durvasa Muni says, okay, when the king sees his ring again, then he'll remember her. So everybody's thinking, it'll go all right. So she goes to see Dushmanta later on, and they have to cross a river. She puts her hand in the river, and the ring falls off. So she goes to see Dushmanta. Dushmanta says, who are you, young lady? And she says, I'm your wife. And here's my son, or your son. And he says, what? He says, get the whatever out of here. He said, you better get out of here, lady. And he just kicks her out. Poor lady, poor girl. And so she's lamenting. In the meantime, some fisherman is fishing, and he catches a fish. And in the fish's belly is the ring. And he sees it's the king's ring. He brings it back to the king. The king gets the ring. He remembers, and he calls for her back, and they live happily ever after. And their son's name is Bart, after whom Bart Varsha is named. There's another Bart who's the son of Rishabhadeva. I understand that. There's other Barts too. But Prabhupada said after this Bart or the other one, Bart Varsha is named. So he's a famous king. So anyway, getting back to Viswamitra. So he loses all his austerities by living with Menaka for 10 years. So the poor guy keeps just losing it because of lust, anger, greed, and everything like that. So then he goes to the Himalayas for thousands of years, and he gets the title of Maharishi. Mahayesh Yogi. Anyway, Maharishi means a great rishi. He's not happy. And then he does 1,000 more years in the Himalayas, and Indra says, we got to stop it. And he sends down Ramba, another heavenly society girl. And at this point, Ramba comes with Cupid. You know who Cupid is? No. Kandarpa? Never heard that name before? Kandarpa, Koti, Kamaniya, Vishesha, Shalvam, Govindam, Adipurusha. Kandarpa means Cupid. You know who Cupid is? You don't have Valentine's Day here? You have Valentine's Day. The women know about it. That's where you have a little boy with diapers on who is shooting arrows. Cool, you know about this? And these arrows are the arrows of love. The form, taste, smell. You don't know about these things? Cupid. How do you pronounce it? Cupid? Cupid, the same way I pronounce it. Yeah, he has arrows and he fires the arrows and you fall in love. So anyway, so Cupid, Kandarpa, he's called Ananga. You know why Cupid is called Ananga? Because he was burnt to ashes by Lord Shiva. Because he tried to fire his arrows at Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva said, that's it. He looked at him in his eyes and he burnt ashes. So therefore you can't see him coming. He just comes. Anyway, so getting back to the story. So Ramba, being sent by Indra, comes down along with Cupid, and at this point, Visamrita doesn't fall in love with her. He gets angry. And he turns her into just like a ghost. And Indra's there. Indra's like in the form of a bird. And Indra just flies away really quickly just to get away from the whole thing. So she becomes a stone or ghost for 10,000 years. Just like Ahalya, similar to Ahalya's story. Poor girl, isn't it? 10,000 years. Then Visamrita thinks, this is not working. I better go to the south, and I'm not going to eat for 1,000 years. Then what happens is he's meditating. A bird in the tree on top of him passes a stool on his head, and he burns the bird to ashes. And he loses more of his austerity. You know, we don't blame the poor bird. Birds aren't toilet trained, you know, basically. And so he loses. So then for another 1,000 years, and then he's given, not given the title. He begins to eat after 1,000 years. And Indra comes disguised as a Brahmin. And Indra says, "Can I have some food?" And Vishwamitra says yes at this point. He passes the test. But then after another, but he doesn't become a Brahma Rishi then. Then after another 1,000 more years, he gets, fire comes from his head or smoke comes from his head, and he gets the title Brahma Rishi, and then him and Vasishta Muni become good friends. And that's all the background story for Vishwamitra Muni. Interesting story, isn't it? So, all right. So, what else? What other background story do you want? Anyone else have other stories you like? Of the different characters that remind. I found out something yesterday that was really interesting about one of the characters. Some of you heard me talking about it before. Don't answer, please. About Manthara. So some people have been asking, who was Manthara in her past life? You know, why did she do such a thing like that? It's a big question in people's minds. Because, I mean, she was the maidservant of Kaikeyi. She should have been a nice girl. Well, it turns out that Manthara in her last life, does anyone know? No, you don't know. No, you won't know. It's not there. It's not in the Ramayana. It's in the Puranas. In her last life, she was the wife of Kali, like Kali Yuga. So she was the same characteristics of Kali and Kali Yuga. And she was also the person who was married to Duryodhana. Because that was, Duryodhana is Kali. Duryodhana in the Mahabharata is the incarnation of Kali, Kali Yuga, not Kali, the goddess. There's a difference between Kali and Kali. You know. Kali and Kali. It's pronounced differently. So there's a difference. So the personality of Kali Yuga, his wife, was Manthara. And that's why she acted like that. Because Kali, what does Kali do? He creates arguments between people and makes people hate each other. You know, the age of quarrel, sometimes Kali Yuga is described as the age of iron, the age of quarrel. Everybody's unfortunate, short-lived, and people fight with each other for no reason whatsoever. So that's Manthara. All right, so, I mean, I have other stories, internal stories. How about the, this is also from the Ramayana. How about the origin of the Ganges? You want to hear that story? Oh, the Ganges. No? Ganges River? No. You don't want to hear that story. You want to hear it? Okay. So once upon a time, there was a king who was basically, oh, this is an interesting story. His father had several wives. And that means polygamy, in case you haven't figured that out. So the word sapatni means like wives, with wives, which is interesting. Like a husband is called pati, and the wife is called patni. You know that, right? Patni, pati. So anyway, so he had several wives, the father of King Sagara. And when he was in his mother's womb, the other wives decided to poison him so he would die. Oops. Sorry. So he would die. Well, people keep sending me messages. Don't send messages now, please. He would die while he was in his mother's womb, but still he was born, and therefore he's called Sagara. Means Sagara means with poison. He was born with poison. He and the poison were born at the same time. So this King Sagara had two wives. And this is kind of amazing stories. Don't get bewildered. Keshani and Sumati. And Sumati gave birth to 60,000 sons. That's a lot of sons. Well, what happened, not one at a time. That's too difficult. She gave birth to a big lump, something like the Mahabharata story. And that became divided. And Keshani, the other son of Sagara, the other wife, had one son, and that one son's name was Asamanja, who was violent. And his son was Angsuman, who was nice. So King Sagara, who was the grandson of King Sagara is Angsuman. King Sagara thought he wanted to do a horse sacrifice. So again, you have Indra entering into the scene. Because whenever these people want to do a horse sacrifice or perform austerities, Indra is thinking that they want to take over the heavenly planets. Because if someone does 1,000 horse sacrifices, they become Indra. So at this particular point, Indra steals the horse, and King Sagara sends his 60,000 sons to look for the horse. Okay? So they go all over, they dig up the earth, really dig it up bad, go through the earth, go to a place called Rasatala, and they saw Lord Kapiladeva and the horse there. And when they saw Lord Kapiladeva and the horse, they thought Lord Kapiladeva had taken the horse, and they got angry at Lord Kapiladeva, and as a result, they all burned to ashes. So here were 60,000 young men, just a pile of ashes. Okay, so that was a problem. So Sagara orders his grandson, Angsuman, to get the horse. So Angsuman gets the horse, and Garuda, the bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, explains what has happened to his uncles. He gets the horse. He's a nice guy. He doesn't get angry at Lord Kapiladeva. And so they're worried, how can we save these 60,000? They're uncles of Angsuman, because Angsuman is the grandson of Sagara, remember? So he's thinking, how can I save all my uncles? And so he's thinking the only way to save them is to get them to be immersed in the ashes to be immersed in the Ganges water. So he does austerities for 1,000 years, not successful. Then he has a son named Dilipa, who tries, not successful. So they're all trying to save their ancestors. So this is actually very important. This is why you do this, Pinda and everything like that, isn't it? Why a son is called a putra. He who saves the father from hell. So, anyway, so they're trying, not successful. Finally, then they have a son named Bhagirath. Okay? And Bhagirath does all these austerities, and the Ganges agrees to come, but says, I have a problem. Two problems, actually. If I come down to this earth planet, first of all, I'm going to split the earth. So someone or something has to stop me. So then Bhagirath goes and performs austerities to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva agrees to stop the Ganges, to break the fall or the force of the Ganges. And then Ganges says, I have one other problem. The other problem is all these fools and rascals will bathe in me. And they're going to all dump their karma on me. And Bhagirath thinks for a second, and he says, well, in addition to all the fools and rascals, the devotees will bathe in me. And they'll purify you. Just like it's described in the Bhagavatam, that as saints, they actually purify even a holy place. Because a holy place, people go to a holy place to dump off their karma. And the saints go and they make a holy place even holier. Or even a place that's not holy, the saints can make a holy place. So that's kind of wonderful. So, then what happens is the Ganges agrees to come. She falls down on Lord Shiva's head, and Lord Shiva sees that she's a little puffed up, and he locks her up in his hair, like that. And Bhagirath prays, please let her go. So she goes, And basically, as she's flowing down towards the sea, there's this other sage named Janu, who is actually really upset because his ashram is getting flooded. So what he does is he drinks up the Ganges. And as he drinks up the Ganges, Bhagirath gets very upset. He says, I did all this work, And so Janu lets the Ganges out of his ear. And he's described as, in one sense, the father of the Ganges because of that, too. Not really the father. The father of the Ganges water actually comes from when the Lord pierced the covering of the material universe in the form of Lord Vamanadeva, and the Ganges water pierced and came in. So, but the Ganges is generally called the Jahnavi. Jahnavi is the name of the Ganges. That means the daughter of Janu. And so she flows to the seas, and the 60,000 sons of Sagara become liberated. And that's also a story in the Ramayana. See what time? Want to hear another story? Do we have time? One more story?
Yeah. Just a question,
Yeah.
we've been saying about different kind of marriages.
Yeah. You're worried about your daughters?
Not really, but looking at different culture, religious
Yeah.
background, people come from, like we have, especially like looking at Indians, we follow the Ramayana and we just have only one wife. We're supposed to have only one wife.
That's right, Ekapatni Vrata.
Yes.
But if you
Whereas-
read the Mahabharata, you'll be in real trouble. You'll have many wives. So better don't read the Mahabharata. I mean, look at Dasara. But the interesting thing is, whenever people had more than one wife, what happened? It's trouble.
Trouble.
Look what happened to Dasarath.
Yes.
Trouble. Look what happened. I mean, look what happened to anybody. Practically any time you have a story of a person with more than one wife, you have Chitraketu, of course, he was supposed to have 10 million wives. He had trouble. So better one. Ekapatni Vrata. Ram had one wife, one arrow, and one word. So what's the question?
No, it's like we see Muslims, they say, 7 wives.
Yeah, well.
So that means they must be following.
Well, Muhammad, here's a little history. It has nothing to do with the Ramayana.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you why they think someone can have many wives. Because here's the whole story of Muhammad. Once upon a time, there was a little boy named Muhammad. It's from the beginning, I'll tell you the story. And he wanted to worship one God. And they got real upset with him in Mecca. So they kicked him out of the city. This is, I'm telling you a very short way. So he went to a city called Medina, the second city of the Muslims. And he got a lot of support there. And eventually he got married to a widow who was very rich. Because this widow's husband had married a man who was extremely rich. He had a caravan. You know what a caravan is? Like many camels and everything like that. It was like, nowadays, of course, you have, Western trucking here. Isn't it? You have trucking companies here. So in those days, instead of trucking companies, you had camel caravans. It was more ecological. Camels are very pure creatures, Actually, some of these viruses came because the Arabs were eating camels. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Some of these
It's
viruses
really
came from camel eating.
Okay.
They're very dirty creatures. Actually, if you've ever ridden on a camel, they're one of the smelliest creatures on earth. So anyway, back to the story. So Muhammad, he married this widow, and she was very rich. He became very rich and powerful as a result of that. And he wanted to become more rich and powerful to spread religion. So he had a strategy. It's called Krishna Arabic. It's like you have Krishna West, Krishna Arabic, And they were very primitive people at that time. So Saudi Arabia, which is where Muhammad came from, wasn't called Saudi Arabia then, was very disunited. There were many tribes. You understand?
Yeah.
So the way to unite kingdoms, also this is there in the Mahabharata too. the way to unite kingdoms, you have a marriage between two kingdoms, between two families. So, yes, so in Mahabharata, there's many stories about that, of course, because Arjuna married into Krishna's family, and Duryodhana wanted to marry into Krishna's family. Duryodhana wanted to marry Subhadra.
Yes.
Remember that? And then Arjuna had to kidnap her. So, Muhammad married the princesses from practically all the major tribes in Saudi Arabia at that time as a political scheme.
Political scheme.
So he had literally 1,001 Arabian wives. Anyway, so he had many wives. In fact, anyway, there's people who talk about how he married like a 12-year-old girl, or, I'm not going to get into that because I may get attacked and killed tomorrow. Talk about it. I know what's more dangerous than the coronavirus. Is corona people, They take the virus any day. So he did that as political scheme. And basically his followers, many of them married many wives too. And that was the system at that particular point. And that's how they spread the religion. Also, there's another religion, which you may be more familiar with, which is called the Mormon religion. You heard of the Mormon religion?
No.
LDS?
LDS.
LDS, Mormons, the same thing. LDS stands for Later Day Saints. You see all these young boys walking around with the suits on.
Yes.
I'm sure they come to your house and everything.
I welcome everybody.
They're very nice people.
Yeah.
So the original founder, Joseph Smith, I'm not going to talk about his religion, that's not really part of this whole discussion. He had like 25 wives. I forget the exact number, at least 25. And you can imagine how many children. It's really effective when you're starting a religion. I mean, it's a good way to get things started, I'm not proposing that anyone should do that. It's not a good idea. So, anyway, so modern day Muslims, they're actually advised to have as many children as possible.
Yes, they like talking to a lot of Muslims. They say even they promote marriages like with Hindus. We want a Hindu to get married with a Hindu boy or Hindu girl.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas they prefer to go out of their community, because if they marry say for example, if a Muslim boy get married to a Indian girl, or a non-Muslim girl, then
they'll bring them in. Yeah.
It is they bring him and make her a Muslim.
Yeah.
So
And if
that's
someone
a
wants
plus
to
point.
leave, they kill them.
Well, they
Yeah.
don't say it, but yes.
Yes, they don't say it.
So
But anyway, I don't want to get into that whole controversy. But the point is that it's a strategy. It's a strategy for increasing the number of particular members of a particular religion. But our process in Krishna consciousness is to convince people from their hearts to become devotees, because actually people could follow things ritualistically, externally, but not actually be at heart members of the body. So we want people to come voluntarily to our movement. And even with our children, we don't force them to be Krishna conscious. It's all voluntary. So anyway, yes, we say Ekapatni Vrata. Ekapatni Vrata. But there are many instances in our literatures too but not in the modern day, so many instances.
at that time they were big rulers. They had
But even
capacity to do it too.
not to disturb anyone here, but even during Prabhupada's time, Prabhupada wanted a second wife. You don't know the story. Don't take this. None of you men should think about it. None of you ladies should think about it. But it was in India at that time, around the 1900s, the turn of that century, 20th century. It was accepted that even Hindus could have more than one wife. So Prabhupada's wife was really bad. She used to stop his preaching. She used to, do all sorts of things like blow a feather duster in his guests' faces when he tried to preach Krishna consciousness. And so Prabhupada thought, I want to marry someone at least a little nice to me. She was basically trouble for Prabhupada. And she would take his Bhagavatams and sell them for tea biscuits. You know the story, right?
Yes.
So Prabhupada said to his father, he went to his father, Gaur Mohan, Dave, and he said, I'd like to really look for someone else. Keep my present wife, that's okay, but, have someone I can get along with here. And Prabhupada's father said, no. He said, your present wife is good for you.
I think that's why he became very successful.
Yeah. He just said, your present wife is good for you because in this way you'll never get attached to this world.
Yes.
Because Prabhupada's whole horoscope was that at the age, 60, he was going to take sannyas and go to the Western world. And in India, that's a very hard thing for someone to take sannyas. In the Western world, it's easy. You can get people to drop their girlfriends in a second. Like when Tamal Krishna Maharaj was preaching in America, sometimes, they had this bus, the Radha Damodar bus, some of you may have heard about this. There would be a boy and his girlfriend, and they were living together, just like marriage. And he would say, they would put the boy, convince the boy to take up Krishna consciousness, and then tell the boy he had to give up his girlfriend, and send the boy to pick up all of his belongings with another brahmachari to keep the girlfriend away. And the bus would pull away with the girlfriend crying as the bus pulled away. So I don't think that's a good idea. Anyway, I'm not in favor of those things. Nowadays, I arrange marriages. I do the opposite with my disciples. I say, you must get married. Your shotgun, get married. So anyway, so Prabhupada's father said this, it'll be good for you to have that wife because this way you'll be detached from this world. And Prabhupada listened to his father, and Prabhupada had one wife. So, anyway, interesting story. We follow the Ramayana, but not Dasarath only. And not Ravan either. We follow Ram. Ram is the best example of Dharma. Maryada Purushottama. Right? He's actually the best example. We don't follow Krishna's example. Krishna is one of the worst examples. Come on, man, he's stealing, passing urine on people's floor, pinching babies, child abuse, playing his flute in the middle of the night so all the people's wives come and join him. From another angle, it's okay. Because all these girls are actually Krishnas, belong to Krishna. And actually Krishna married them during the year that he became all the cowherd boys and calves. When Lord Brahma had stolen the real cowherd boys and calves, Krishna married these girls. So he actually, literally, figuratively, philosophically, Krishna was married to these girls. So there's nothing wrong. But the external example is not for us. 16,000 women. Not for us. So, Ekapatni Vrata.
Not in Kali Yuga.
Not in Kali Yuga. Well, not in any yuga. Not in any yuga. Just be Krishna conscious. That's the main thing. Life is not made better by the more material things you have. Like that. It's made more complicated. Isn't it? The more you have, the more complicated. Just like I see here in Fiji, sometimes the happiest people are the people with less. You're not in anxiety about things. You have more time for spiritual life. You don't have to worry about a mortgage. It's just like Krishna, Govinda. Otherwise, anxiety. Okay, I think we should end for right now. And tomorrow we'll continue it. some more stories.
Continue.
Yeah, we'll have more. And we'll get into all the stories. I mean, I have, because I've read the Valmiki Ramayan several times, and I'm still reading it now. Actually, when I take rest at night, I usually read for about a half an hour as I'm taking rest, because it's a good bedtime story. And I have the whole Valmiki Ramayan. It's a really beautiful book. I mean, I have an e-book, so I'm able to read it on something called a Kindle. You heard of Kindle before? Kindle is an e-reader. It's a little tiny thing like this, and it's nectarian.
In Fiji, a lot of the groups they read Tulsi Kira.
Yeah, I mean, Tulsi Ramayan is nice, but it's not the original, and it's
Yeah.
missing a lot of the details.
Yeah.
Whereas I know all these details. These are just my notes
Yeah.
on the Ramayana, and there's something like 20 pages of notes. There's notes I've taken throughout the years on the different stories in the Ramayana. And so I have a good translation. I can give anyone if you want to read it on a computer. Yeah.
This one.
This is not the translation. This is my notes.
Yeah.
This is where I took the notes from. I actually have two translations. One is in book form, which I don't have with me, which is from the Gita Press, and the other one is actually an e-format that I have with me. Okay, we can end now. Shri Ram, Jai Ram.